Our transport system obviously is facing a range of challenges, including the fact that many of our assets are aging. A lot of them are well over 100 years old. So, on the one hand, we've got to maintain them in operational condition for the next 100 years or more. But at the same time, we're seeking to decarbonise our transport system. We're seeking to make it more adaptable and resilient to future climate. And we're also asking more of it all the time. So a lot of our assets are far more heavily loaded than they were ever designed for. So this means that we're having to make some fairly substantial investments and changes in our transport system, with many, many different factors that need to be considered at the same time. And we don't really at the moment have a consistent framework that we can apply across the transport system at all levels, from sort of local individual asset decision making up to strategic decision making, and across a whole range of timeframes, from the immediate operational timeframe to the sort of more strategic timeframe around actually what do we need to be doing now to make our transport system ready for 50 years' time? What do we need to be planning for now to deliver in the future to make our transport system appropriate for the conditions it's going to see in 50 years? So we need to have a framework that brings all of these different things together in a consistent way, both across different transport modes and within transport modes at different scales and different timeframes. So the decision support framework aims to deliver this, and it's divided up into a number of different modules, including a module around asset condition. So that's really about how do we understand the current condition and capacity of our assets, how rapidly their condition might be degrading, and therefore plan for sort of maintenance interventions into the future. There's a component around sustainability. So with any interventions that we're making on the physical assets, how do we ensure that we're doing that in a way that responds to the decarbonisation requirements, but also reflects concerns around, for example, biodiversity net gain, avoiding pollution and so forth. And then also looking at, importantly, system interdependency. So both within, say, a transport system like the railways, how track and drainage interface with each other, but then also between our transport systems and indeed our transport systems and our wider infrastructure systems. So the system interdependencies both upstream and downstream of the problem that we're considering in any given moment. And all of this feeds into a risk management and decision-making module, which helps us understand what the risks are in the context of resilience, adaptation, and decarbonisation, and make decisions, surrounded decisions about how we manage that then influence, obviously, what the future condition and capacity of these physical assets might be, which then feeds into what colleagues are doing, looking at our integrated modelling framework, which is dealing much more with how the transport system is used and how vehicles, people, and freight flow around the transport system. Whereas what we're looking at in the decision support framework is, if you like, the supply side, the physical assets that support that transport. So far, in terms of developing the framework, what we've done is identify what those core modules are that I just mentioned, and then also start to explore, what is inside those modules. There's an awful lot of existing frameworks. For example, in the sustainability module, we're looking at life cycle carbon assessment, life cycle cost analysis, as well as issues around pollution and wider carbon emissions and so forth, and resource use. So we've been looking at what's within each of the modules, but then also how the modules relate to each other. And then we've been testing that with colleagues in National Highways and soon in Network Rail to understand how it relates to how they currently take decisions and the current decision support tools that they have, so that we can make sure that the framework both reflects how decisions are made in reality within these organisations, but also helps identify perhaps where some of the gaps are. And then also helps reveal how the different reporting mechanisms and decision support tools that exist already can be sort of compared across organisations to create this sort of consistent approach that I mentioned before, because we can't expect people to throw out what they're already doing. We very much have to work with what's already in place in these organisations and has been developed over many years and decades already. So the next steps with the decision support framework are really to explore in more detail how we can really use it to support decision making. So both taking some sort of thought experiments around some previous initiatives or decisions that we're aware of that have had to happen in the transport system, but then also working with colleagues in the DfT's arm's length bodies like National Highways and Network Rail to look at how the decision support framework might actually help them in decisions they're taking now, and how we knit what they're already doing into the framework in a more seamless way. But then also importantly, we're looking at that integration piece with the integrated modelling framework. So really thinking about how we can understand how we can use the framework, for example, to plan major interventions where we might have, for example, a series of bridge crossings that need maintenance, and how we plan those interventions in such a way that the disruptions to the transport network are as small as possible, but also think about, if, for example, a climate event happened whilst the capacity of one bridge was restricted, what impact that would have on the wider transport system. Also looking at issues like, for example, areas where we might have substantial future development, or a new railway or a new road is being built, and actually the implications of that for both how the transport system operates, but also how we deliver those new assets in a way that is both decarbonised and takes into account future climate demands and so forth.